You're listening to The Streaming Wars, the podcast that discusses all of the latest happenings regarding your favorite streaming services. Find out which service is winning the war this time around.
Welcome to the latest episode of The Streaming Wars. I'm Dustin and Tony is with me, and we're here to cover the news and topics of discussion from December 16th through January 5th. It's a brand new year, and with a brand new year, 2021, we're looking at 2020 and saying, what can we do better? And obviously, 2020 was a horrible year for the world in general, but here at The Streaming Wars, we've decided that we're going to be changing some things up, and we're going to be looking at a new way of doing the podcast. And one of the new ways we're going to be doing this is we're going to try to have a little bit more discussion when it comes to some of these news points. We're going to focus a lot less on the entertainment news that isn't really topic of discussion worthy. It's not really worthy of a discussion. We're going to be focusing a little bit more on our thoughts when it comes to these various different topics that pop up over the last week that we're working. Of course, this week we've got 3 weeks worth of content to cover, but we're going to kind of break it up in a better fashion. We're not going to specifically stick to a format that we had before where we would run down all of the news and we would run it down separated by service, because as we know, there's plenty of times where services don't have any news over a week. So because of that, if you are following us on Twitter, if you are looking for the news, we still will be posting the news, the entertainment news, all the news that we have been posting in the past. That stuff will all still be posting on our Twitter over the course of the week, and our show notes will still actually feature all of the different news that actually happened over the past week. However, here on the podcast, we're going to stick to the discussions that we really feel are like the big things that have happened since our last episode, and that's what we're going to be doing. Our episodes might become a little bit shorter, but we're going to be trying to have a lot more discussion around some of these topics, and we hope that you guys are going to enjoy this new format, and we are appreciative of any feedback you can give to us after you listen to this episode and see whether or not you like this new format going forward. So with that being said, we've got some stuff that has happened over the past 3 weeks. Obviously, the holidays were upon us. More people have streaming devices. There's a streaming service that actually just launched, and there's more streaming services that have been announced, and there's a lot to talk about. So the first topic that we're going to talk about is sports. We've talked about sports at length a variety of different times when it comes to sports on streaming services, and there's two news points that popped up over the past 3 weeks. One specifically deals with the Premier League lacrosse. They currently have a deal with NBC Sports, and the president of the league actually did an interview saying it's been very successful at NBC Sports, and he's positive that when they renegotiate their new contract, Peacock is going to be involved in that, and it's very likely that some of those games are going to end up over on Peacock. So Peacock will acquire yet another sport, not as big of a name sport as something like the NFL or MLB or NBA, but of course, as you add the smaller sports leagues to your service, it just gravitates more and more people to your service. If it's something that the bigger players aren't paying attention to, that's the case. Also, the other bit of news coming from sports, the world of sports, is that Prime Video is also potentially looking at bringing Formula One to their service. And this is huge news. It's not confirmed at this point. It just basically, it was an article that said that they could be interested in this, and it's very likely that talks have already started and negotiations are taking place between the two companies, specifically to bring races to Prime Video. So, as we've talked about many times in the past, sports is a huge component to making some of these services successful. And the question is, do you think that lacrosse and Formula One, to the respective service that we're referring to, do you think that they could be good adds to their services?
Yeah, I think so. Just to lay it out, Premier League lacrosse is not as popular worldwide as, Formula One racing. I just looked up the numbers, and the Premier Lacrosse League, it had, for the championship game, it had over 334,000 viewers for that game, and that was worldwide. So I mean, that's a good number. It's not some of these crazy things like if you expect like the NFL games that are on, or golf that's on there, or baseball on streaming services. But it's a healthy audience and it's growing. The people who like lacrosse, kind of dedicated fans. It's a sport that is not so big where I live, kind of in the southern United States, but it's definitely a bigger thing up north. And so I think that's really cool. It allows these niche sports to really get some exposure there. If you look at ESPN, to pivot for a second, ESPN has also delved into like non-mainstream sports of like NFL, NBA. They've really been big into like esports. They've been big into like drone racing or something. So you're seeing it's ESPN. You're seeing Peacock get into these very niche sports, and they have a lot of viewers to talk about like Formula One in that ordeal with Amazon Prime Video. And I looked in, there were a couple different numbers and they were very, very vague of what the true number was. But the most consensus number I found was that worldwide, Formula One had, a global audience of 471 million viewers who watched all of the Formula One races in the year of 2020. And Dustin, that's a huge number, much bigger than I was expecting it to be when I looked at these numbers. And so if they can convert even just to, some small percentage, that's a huge amount of viewership there. And so I think that's great for Prime Video, much more than I think lacrosse would be for Peacock. I think that Formula One would have a more direct impact to the profits of Prime Video versus Peacock. What's also nice about especially like Formula One, and I know lacrosse can have the same effect, but I just know a lot of people who watch sports, race cars, Formula One, NASCAR, and stuff like that, is that yes, you can watch the entire race at that one time, or I know people who they can't watch the race due to like they have to have these other engagements, and they're able then they miss the race, and they really wish they were able to pick it back up, because for them it's more than just like watching a race. It's a whole experience for them, and that's great. But you're not able to have that. And so getting it, watching, that content, after the fact, kind of whenever you want, I think is really great. Really great for the fans of Formula One. And also like, if you have to, pause it, especially in the middle, and you have to go do something else, it's another like feature as well. So I can definitely see like racing being on, streaming services, Prime Video, a really good venture. So I'm curious to see in the future with like NASCAR and other things. But yeah, sports or streaming services, that's the thing that we've been talking about, an area for these streaming services to separate themselves from the competitors. And I think it's a huge viewing market that you can get into. And I feel like we're still at the baby stages of these streaming services diving into sports leagues. And so I think Formula One, with its huge audience, is pretty huge. And we definitely seen Prime Video really take the bet on sports as well. I know they had Premier League on Prime Video. They had some NFL games, and then if I can recall, maybe they also had cricket, right? I think we covered that a while back. And so you've definitely seen Prime Video delve into this more, and so it makes sense that they would dive into another sport as well.
Yes. And I think that ultimately, obviously, like you said, Formula One is way bigger than lacrosse and is going to drive a lot more people to a service, which could be great for Prime Video. I think that in some ways, Formula One is a good fit for Prime Video, not only because Prime Video works in a lot of global markets outside of the United States, but the thing with, when you look at some of the other services, obviously Peacock, HBO Max, Paramount Plus at this point is just here, Hulu is just here. These services are just here in the United States. Yes, some of them have intentions of rolling out internationally. Some of them have no intention of rolling out internationally. I haven't heard anything about a Peacock international rollout anytime in the immediate future. We know HBO Max is aiming for that. But a lot of what they're trying to do is, if you don't have the established library of content to retain your customer base, you have to come up with new ways of getting customers to continue to come back month after month and pay for that subscription. And one of the ways to do that is sports. You look at Netflix, and Netflix produces a large amount of content every single month for their service. And obviously they're the leader when it comes to streaming services right now, with the number of the amount of subscribers, but also the amount of content that they're actually producing every single month. But the issue is that how much of that content is transitioning to keeping subscribers. That large number of content, the intent is hopefully a subscriber who's subscribing to Netflix for one of their big shows like Stranger Things. They check out Stranger Things, they find something else that keeps them subscribing to the service after they finish the season. With sports, it opens up that door where there's consistent races throughout the year. There's consistent, there's all kinds of different sporting events throughout the year that can keep a subscriber maintaining that subscription every single month, and that is a way to do it. When you look at a service like HBO Max, they obviously are going to try to bring in customers, but retaining them is going to be it'll be easier than some of the other companies because they have such a large library. It's the same thing as Disney Plus. They have such a large library of content that generally helps them retain those customers that come in for the larger events like The Mandalorian or some of the upcoming Marvel shows and things like that. But sports is one of those ways, and it looks like Prime Video is really putting their chips on the idea that sports can help them retain those subscribers. When you look at Netflix, can they retain their customers as a lot of the licensed content that they have as it leaves the service? Maybe, they'll find some more really big hits, but they have to continuously do that, and we already know that they're facing a lot of issues with how much money they're actually spending on the content that they're producing, and on top of that, the content that they're licensing. So if you were able to get a licensing deal with a sporting company of some sort, whether it be Formula One or whether it be the NFL or whatever sporting company you want that's out there, if you're able to get that and you're able to get a consistent run of original content obviously being new races or new games or new events, that is going to be something that's going to keep people to your service. And I think that's why sports keeps popping up over and over and over again.
I mean, you said it perfectly. I cannot say it any better. Sports is the new frontier, I think, in streaming. And frankly, it's the only reason why I have a YouTube TV subscription is for the few sports that I watch during this sports season. And so if I'm able to get that through Prime Video or, another streaming services that has like content that I would actually watch versus this cable TV that's basically on the internet now, I think that would improve a lot of experiences. And I think that, these streaming services like Prime Video can definitely eat into the market share of like a Hulu TV or a YouTube TV if they can keep getting, a lot of these different deals in the future. Sports is a huge area. And to think about it as well, Disney Plus, we talked about, I think it was the last episode, of how they had a huge bump in, subscribers and, how their numbers are now in the 80 millions. But numbers, so correct me if I'm wrong, but about 30 million of that came from, Hotstar activations when they, did that whole thing with Hotstar in India. And I think the main thing that the Hotstar platform is known for is streaming cricket. So, I mean, you can build a streaming service off of a sport and have other content with it. It's very profitable.
All right, so some other big news over the past couple weeks has been some things related to devices. We'll get to the biggest one in a second here, but some of the interesting announcements, one of them that directly affects me because I'm, as anybody who's been listening to the show long for at least the last couple months knows, that I have been super hyped about the Google TV with Chromecast device that came out just a couple months ago, and I got it, and I really like the device, and I appreciate what it is. I like that it works with the Google ecosystem. Nothing against Roku or Fire Stick. I've never used a Fire Stick outside of being at somebody else's house, but I have a Roku, and I just find it kind of crammed with unnecessary stuff. But I like the Google TV with Chromecast. One of the things that I really have been hoping for, based off of some announcements, is Apple TV Plus being able to be used on that device so that I can specifically have a device that I prefer to use to be able to watch and subscribe to Apple TV Plus. There's plenty of shows on Apple TV Plus that I want to check out. 2021 is going to be a year where there's a lot of other new original shows coming to Apple TV Plus, and I'm looking forward to that. But I have yet to subscribe or watch any of the shows because I didn't really want to watch it on the Roku, which I use on a secondary TV that my kids typically use. So that all being said, there was word just, I believe about a month ago, that Sony TVs that run Android TV on them were going to be getting Apple TV Plus before the end of the year. And I was like, well, it's only a matter of time before that happens. And lo and behold, it was actually officially announced by Google themselves that Apple TV Plus is going to be coming to the Google TV with Chromecast devices early in 2021. Now, there's no word exactly on when, but I would assume probably before March at the very latest. But I'm pretty pumped about that because, like I said, there's plenty of shows on Apple TV Plus that I've just been waiting for the right time to be able to watch, and I'm going to be going on a binge watch of a lot of Apple TV Plus content.
Well, I'm glad that you're going to binge watch Apple TV Plus content. The only show that I enjoyed was Mythic Quest, and then I haven't really touched it since, and I let my subscription drop. So hopefully it's you enjoy the experience. No, I'm glad that you like your Chrome device, that new Chromecast thing, the new Google TV device, and it looked really cool. If I had to check out another platform besides Roku, it would definitely be that, because I like the engineering in their platform and whatnot. So yeah, I'm glad you're able to enjoy it and get to check it out during the holiday season.
Yes, and speaking of the holiday season, I know that you got an early Christmas present because HBO Max ended up landing on Roku.
Hallelujah, it did. I mean, listeners of the show, that I've been complaining about this for a while, and finally HBO Max is going to be on Roku. I was so excited just to check it out, and I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I was able to watch Wonder Woman the day of Christmas that night as we all got back home and was tired out from seeing family. We were able to watch that, and it was really cool watching that 4K right out of the box. Some streaming services you're not able to watch 4K, but they were able to get that in 4K, so it was really nice. Yeah, I'm so happy about that. My wife and I have been on a binge of HBO Max content ever since. Yeah, it was a good experience for its app. I thought that it'd be more polished given the amount of time that they've had to develop the product, although it's been in stasis for a while due to contractual issues. I figured that it would be a more polished experience, and it's all right. It's a good first app. I've definitely seen better by different competitors. I think Disney Plus had a very solid first iteration. There are times where it's a bit clunky. There's times where it's a bit slow. There are times where I've had to restart my TV due to some weird issue with going out of HBO Max very quickly. But overall, it was great to see content. It was great to, go around and check out the library. I mean, it had a whole view of hey, check out all the Ocean's movies. I was like, oh, I like those movies. So it was really cool to see those types of recommendations of, categorizing things by, different, franchises. So overall, that was a good experience. It was a really great Christmas present by HBO Max and Roku. So, thank you. And I don't know how to say thank you enough. It's been a lot of fun.
And if you happen to be one of the lucky few people that were able to get a PS5, HBO Max also landed on PS5s over the past couple of weeks as well. And with obviously HBO Max landing on Roku, it basically means that HBO Max has now completed their footprint as far as distribution devices, which is a big deal. And it'll be interesting to see going forward what that means for HBO Max activations. If activation, the next time we hear activation numbers, if it's going to have a significant jump up because of the market share that Roku currently has when it comes to streaming devices.
Agreed. I think that we, as collectively analysts watching this, HBO Max in the industry, starting, I think that we've given them a pass. Yes, they started up during COVID, and okay. So besides that, I think we've all given them a pass in terms of their activations, subscribers, however, the whole ordeal is between HBO and HBO Max, all their numbers, because they haven't been on Roku, which is the biggest, platform out of all the different platforms out there. And so now that they do have access to the Roku devices and the whole platform, we now should see, okay, what are the true numbers? How fast is this growing? And is it growing at a rate that is, meeting or exceeding, industry, projections? Or I feel like we can really judge HBO Max on a fair grade now, and for what it is, and if it's going to succeed or fail. So there's no excuses. HBO Max, you can't hide behind them. It's time to deliver.
Exactly. All right. So obviously we talked about new services. There's a couple of interesting things. One, before we get into the big launch that just actually took place, I want to talk about announcements. It was related to a new service that was announced. BBC Studios has announced that they're going to be launching a service here in the US. Now, to me, it seems odd that this would be happening, considering BBC already licenses a lot of their content out to other services. There's already multiple British-centric services. There's BritBox, there's Acorn TV that focus on British and other European content. There's also a lot of BBC content that's actually been licensed to HBO Max, including the more recent seasons of Doctor Who, among others. And it just seems weird that they would be deciding to get into this. But as we pointed out in the past, when it comes to if you are a media company and you're not putting together a streaming service, you have to have some really good licensing deals in place to make sure that you have that consistent flow of money, because having a service by itself is going to cost a bunch of money. It's not cheap to have a service, but also the potential is significant enough to warrant it in most cases. Sony is the only one that doesn't seem to have a problem just licensing their content for the time being, but we'll see how long that lasts. Sony also happens to have a lot of other factors when it comes to other revenue streams that they're not necessarily solely focused on making sure that their content division is bolstering and producing content, and then in turn having a service like HBO Max or like Disney Plus or something like that. So
yeah, definitely. We've had many niche services that we've talked about and definitely haven't talked about because there's so many that are out there. But yeah, I would call this in the niche, in a niche streaming service at the moment. But BBC, I mean, that's not a niche, media company. That is a huge media powerhouse, and they deliver really good content. And I like a lot of the shows. They have really good documentaries. I mean, the BBC is a really huge thing, and I feel like people in America tend to forget that. I just know some people who do. But if I'm wrong, this is going to be the first streaming service by a major media company that is not based in the US, or at least not founded in the US, and has grown from there. And so I'm curious how that's going to go, and especially since they're trying to reach the US and Canadian markets. That to me is kind of surprising. I looked through, the article that we post in the show notes, and it doesn't talk anything about launching in the UK or the EU region. And so that's surprising. And I figured that they would at least, target the people closest to them first, and then reach out to the United States and Canada. Because I mean, that's what the US companies do. They start in the US, start in Canada, and then they branch from there. So wish them the best. But yeah, it was just kind of like a random piece of news that we found.
And then speaking of other announcements, it was also announced that when it comes to HBO Max, Warner Media has purchased the company you.i TV, and the idea behind this purchase is that it's going to help them with their international rollout of HBO Max. And this can be a big thing, but why can it be a big thing?
Yeah, I think this is bigger than the headline reads. So you.i TV, it's honestly kind of hard to say very quickly. This company specializes in creating streaming apps for different platforms. So they create the UI, create how it interfaces with the different content servers that's going to connect to. So like Netflix to HBO Max, all that different stuff of managing those connections and working there. And it also is able to run their apps, and they specialize on running on every different platform and different devices as well. I think this is important for Warner Media, and yeah, they do hire software engineers like any big company would do, but getting some specialization in delivering the streaming apps is important. And they're not able to compete at the rate that they want to compete. They need some help. And they can't be like Netflix and over time figure out how to do this pretty well. They need help, very much upfront. And, I looked at you.i TV, and, some of the showcases that they've done are been for some pretty big services. And so that's very nice. And so I feel like this acquisition is going to be really important, as yes, they definitely scale into international, but even I think domestic as well, if they can get on board pretty quickly, because as I talked about, the HBO Max app I felt like pretty buggy, and they can definitely help there. And, what this purchase also allows is like, this company specializes in, they have one core code base of the whole entire, UI experience. And then they will, at the very end, target, all these different platforms in, kind of OSs and devices and stuff like that. So that can reduce the complexity of like Warner Media, that they have to manage all these different things. You'll have a consistent experience between all different platforms and devices. And so to finally, end the software talk, I think this is a bigger purchase than I think people let on. I mean, BAMTech acquisition, Disney's acquisition of BAMTech, I felt like it was bigger. That never got addressed enough in the media, because it was the core basis of their streaming platform. And I feel like this is kind of in that area of hidden, not going to get as much publicity, but it's going to have a huge impact on Warner Media's streaming services moving forward.
Yeah, and we know that the BAMTech one, while it's not touted as one of the big acquisitions by Disney, it probably is one of the most important acquisitions when it comes to Disney for the rollout and success of Disney Plus, because without that acquisition, they would have had to, either hire somebody outside or do it in-house, and there's no guarantee that it would have been as the service itself would have been built as efficiently as it has been. So there's that. All right, so let's talk about Discovery Plus. Discovery Plus just launched, and luckily they did not run into the same problems as HBO Max or Peacock has recently. They were available on Roku and Amazon right away for launch. They also had multiple mobile deals in place when it came to not only the US, but also certain markets in Europe as well, deals in place with mobile companies. The big news, obviously, here is Discovery Plus is out there. It's available for everyone to see. The one, I guess, I'll say this. I personally am not somebody who's going to be looking at subscribing to this. There are some shows that I would watch, but I don't watch on a consistent basis. It's more of a white noise in the background of, a home improvement show or something like that I would watch, or House Hunters or something like that. But I don't watch enough of these shows on a regular basis to subscribe to make it worth the money every single month, even if it is a reasonable price. But I will say that one of the things that I think a lot of people who subscribe to the service, thinking that they were going to be getting a massive library, there was a massive library of content, but there was some major shows that were missing from Discovery Plus that I don't think Discovery did a good enough job of disclosing were going to be missing. Some of their most popular shows, like House Hunters from HGTV, 90 Day Fiancé from TLC, these shows aren't there. And there's also Fixer Upper, Property Brothers. These are all shows that a lot of people expect to be there. And it turns out that Discovery has a deal in place with Hulu, where a lot of these shows that are extremely popular are exclusive to Hulu for at least the foreseeable future. Now, the catch, of course, is that they've announced that at the end of January, they're going to be launching some linear channels on the service themselves. Not linear, I shouldn't say linear, but they're launching streaming channels on the service, similar to the way Peacock and Pluto TV and some of the other services out there, they have ongoing channels that play content. That's how they're going to get around the fact that they don't have streaming deals or streaming licenses for some of their most popular shows. So they'll have a channel for 90 Day Fiancé where it'll just play consistently 24 hours a day, play content from that, and that's how they get around the fact that you can't watch the show on demand. In the meantime, if you're looking for those shows, that's why I'm sure that's probably the question on a lot of people's minds who potentially subscribed to the service yesterday right away or pre-subscribed to the service. They were expecting those shows to be there and they weren't. But that's not to say that once the deal is up with Hulu, which the problem is nobody knows exactly when that deal is not going to be in place anymore, because that deal was struck just in 2018, so it hasn't been that long of a period of time. But for the time being, those shows are not there. And I will say, to me, it's just amusing because the CEO touted so much about how they own their own content. They were able to go to all the global markets with their own content because they were just like Disney and they have all their content, and their top tier shows are exclusive on Hulu and not even available on their own service. So that was the one thing that I found amusing about their launch. But I mean, as far as glitches and anything like that, I haven't heard any real bad chatter. But honestly, the media is not covering this launch like they have some of the other ones, because quite honestly, it's just not as big of a launch when it comes to the minds of a lot of the journalists out there.
Yeah, I'm definitely in the camp of you. Not really going to check it out. None of the content just speaks for me. It would speak to my mom. She would enjoy a lot of this. I think the 24/7 feeds is a pretty interesting idea, because I feel like the type of shows that they're reaching, like Fixer Upper, 90 Day Fiancé, I mean, I highly doubt that people want to, binge, quote unquote, binge watch that from start to end. I think, like you said, people start that, or they want to start it from the beginning, or they'll just turn it on and then do whatever they want to do. And I think it's a good stopgap of, yes, okay, they don't have the full true rights to their backlog, but doing it in this way, I feel like it's a good, stopgap measure. And I think it's still going to reach the audience in a meaningful way. What I figured out was pretty interesting from, this article was that their global rollout is slated for 2021. So in this year, they are going to start the whole global rollout, and they've already started in the UK. I don't know about you, Dustin, but that's probably like the fastest rollout that we've seen to the international markets.
The only one that was faster was Apple TV Plus, because they launched everywhere at the same time. I mean, it was also Apple, where they didn't have to worry about content deals and things like that, because they only had whatever content that they personally made. So
yeah, I mean, it's amazing for Discovery Plus to launch so quickly in these different markets, given that they've had so many delays. And it was still somehow they developed their streaming service somehow quickly, because there's so many push-offs of like, okay, it's starting now, and then all right, we started here and then we're rolling out everywhere. I don't know, I found that kind of humorous, actually.
Now, before we get into our final discussion, there's a quick thing that I wanted to bring up. I thought we were never probably going to ever talk about Quibi again, but as it turns out, Quibi popped up back in the news, not because Quibi's returning or anything like that, but as we talked about, the one thing that's kind of lingering out there when it comes to the demise of Quibi is their content library and where that will end up. And as it turns out, there's been a lot of different talk about where it could end up. certain projects could just end up back at their original license holder. But it turns out, because Quibi does own that stuff, they can sell it off, or at least license it off to somebody else and make a little bit of money off of it. And it turns out that right now it seems like Roku is the location that stuff's going to end up at. Roku obviously has their own number of capabilities when it comes to licensing content and things like that. But it'll be interesting to see how this content is actually presented on Roku, because obviously the Quibi content was all about the turnstile. Some of the content doesn't really make a difference one way or the other if you have the turnstile capabilities. But if Roku ends up with the content, maybe some of that stuff that maybe people weren't able to see that did release through Quibi, they'll end up actually being able to see now.
This might be one of the weirdest articles that I texted you about, and I found it. I'm like, man, Dustin's gonna I don't know what he's gonna say about it, but the news about Quibi's not dead. This is weird. I mean, I don't see the true upside for Roku. I feel like these properties are just gonna go to the wayside, I guess. I feel like it's just weird for Quibi's library to end up on Roku just in general. I don't understand that deal. But I also feel like Quibi's content, yes, I didn't like it, but it's still meant for, mobile first. I'm surprised like Facebook or Instagram, which is essentially Facebook, or Snapchat or some of these other, mobile platforms that people use. And I feel like they could have a pretty decent experience with Quibi content. Didn't bid for this, didn't win the bid, because I feel like, Quibi's content can have a place, a meaningful place, more so than it could have a more meaningful place at Roku to get, eyes on it. So it's just a weird deal, in my opinion. And I just wanted to send it to Dustin and, poke him once again. Quibi news won't die.
It'll unfortunately never die, I guess. All right, so our final discussion is talking about the holidays and how streaming went over the holidays. So obviously there was the two big releases. HBO Max had Wonder Woman 1984 that they premiered, and Disney Plus had Soul, Pixar's Soul, and those two did extremely well for the services. There's a couple of articles that have been floated out there talking about how Disney Plus was much more successful with their Christmas offering with Soul because a lot more people tuned in to watch it. All I have to say to that is, well, that would be very obvious, considering Disney Plus has a significantly larger number of subscribers, or at least active users, than HBO Max does. Because the problem is that you're comparing, let's see, their last numbers we had for HBO Max was about 12 million activations, and we have about 88 million subscribers worldwide for Disney Plus. So of course there's going to be a larger number. When you look at the US, there's the same thing. We know for a fact that there's more than 12 million subscribers here in the US when it comes to Disney Plus, just based off of their first day, their initial launch that they had over 10 million subscribers in the first day alone. So I don't think it's right to compare the two. What's more important is to actually look at the stats of what is getting more traction. And what's really interesting is Antenna Data, they released some graphs showcasing some of the big spikes when it comes to HBO Max and Disney Plus. And obviously, when Hamilton came out back in July, it was a huge spike for Disney Plus when it launched, and that was a big deal for Disney Plus to again grow and to get maybe some lapsed subscribers back and things like that. Well, when HBO Max launched, or when Wonder Woman 1984 came out, that number actually spiked as far as the number of people watching Wonder Woman 1984, and that number spiked higher than Hamilton, which is a really big deal. It'll be interesting to see what that ends up translating to, like we said earlier, how that translates to more activations, more subscribers for the service. But it's really unfair to compare Disney Plus and HBO Max and the success of one film to the other film, because one, the audiences are different for both films. Two, the services have a very drastically difference when it comes to the number of actual subscribers, and I think that's important to point out. So while you're looking at the data that we have posted, definitely check out Antenna Data. There's a lot of great stuff that's always popping up over there when it comes to the specific streaming services and data when it comes to streaming trends and things like that. But over the holidays, I mean, let's round out the episode. There was a couple of different things that I took the time to actually check out. Wonder Woman 1984 was one of them. Soul is still on my list, but I haven't actually seen it. I watched a lot of stuff in general on HBO Max. Christmas Day, we actually had had Die Hard going on HBO Max in my house. I watched a couple of other things, but the big thing is there wasn't anything new that I specifically sought out when it came to any new streaming services. I didn't really use Peacock. I didn't really use any of the other services. Honestly, the streaming services that I used most frequently were Netflix and HBO Max, and that was just what I was using. There was a show that came out in December called Alice in Borderlands. It's a Japanese show that they've dubbed, and it's on a Netflix original. I actually watched that. I thought that was really good. I watched a couple of different movies that were available on HBO Max. Overall, there was a lot of really good content. My wife and I watched The Undoing, which was the HBO series that released, I think, in October, November. We watched that over the past couple weeks. So there's a lot of content that we watched just because we had a little bit extra time because of the holidays. But what did you end up checking out over the holiday break?
I watched Wonder Woman 84. That was a lot of fun on HBO Max. Really, since we got HBO Max, I've been diving into that content. So Wonder Woman 84, I promised my wife, she started the Game of Thrones books, but then kind of dropped them, and I promised that we will go on a binge. And so we celebrated the new year by binging a lot of Game of Thrones. And so we are up to season 7 now. So we got to finish that. And then there's other shows on HBO Max that I've really enjoyed. And I think I watched like Titans because I watched that one time. And there are a few other things that I want to check out, like Chernobyl. My two biggest streaming services of late have been, Amazon Prime and then HBO Max. I found a lot of like stuff on Amazon Prime, the IMDb TV channel. They had like Mr. Robot, they had like Suits, just other content that I've enjoyed over the years. And so those have been kind of my two big things.
And obviously 2021 is going to bring a lot more content to the services. It's obviously going to bring some new services. We're still waiting for Paramount Plus and more details on when they're actually going to be launching, but that's going to be coming this year, among some other smaller services that we'll be obviously covering as well as time progresses. So with all that being said, that's going to be it for this episode. I implore you to check out the show notes for all the articles that we talked about here, some that we didn't, and obviously follow us on Twitter and join our Discord to also follow along with those news articles as we post them. You can follow us on Instagram for all the latest announcements related to new episodes of the podcast posting. You can send us an email at thestreamingwars@gmail.com with any questions, comments, concerns, or feedback. And speaking of feedback, wherever you are listening to this podcast, please take the time to leave us a review. It is always greatly appreciated and helps the show grow to other fellow followers of the Streaming Wars. So with all of that being said, for Tony and myself, we hope you guys have a great 2021 and stay safe. We'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to the Streaming Wars. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Links can be found at thestreamingwars.io.